Hey guys, it's Lord of the Pogs. For the next few weeks, we're talking about the 2003 film School of Rock. I've always been interested in the contents of the blackboard where he teaches his students about the history of rock and roll, and this is the scene I want to talk about. Today we're covering folk rock and new wave. Folk rock emerged from the American folk music revival we discussed in episode 1, and the influence the Beatles and other British invasion bands had that we discussed in episode 4. Artists blended the sounds of pop rock with their folk repertoire, adopting the use of electronic instrumentation and drums in such a way that was previously discouraged in the folk community. The term folk rock was first used in 1965 to describe the music of the Byrds. The bands associated with folk rock are listed as Bonnie Raitt, who falls between pop rock, folk rock, and new wave; Van Morrison, Dave Mason, Creedence Clearwater Revival; the band, Jackson Browne, Simon and Garfunkel, Neil Young, Crosby, Stills and Nash, and the Byrds. Van Morrison rose to prominence in the mid-1960s as the lead singer of a North Irish R&B and rock band, and began his solo career in 1967 with the release of the hit single Brown Eyed Girl. Much of his music is structured around the conventions of soul, R&B, Celtic tradition, and jazz. Van Morrison has received 2 Grammy Awards and inductions into the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Irish Music Hall of Fame. Dave Mason is an English singer-songwriter and guitarist who first found fame with the rock band Traffic. One of his best-known songs is Feelin' Alright, recorded by Traffic in 1968 and later by Joe Cocker, whose version was a hit in 1969. He also wrote the psychedelic pop hit Hole in My Shoe. We Just Disagree, his 1977 solo hit, has become a staple of classic hits and adult contemporary radio playlists. The band combined elements of Americana, folk, jazz, country, and R&B, influencing subsequent musicians such as Elton John, the Grateful Dead, and Eric Clapton. Between 1958 and 1963, they were known as a backing band for rockabilly singer Ronnie Hawkins, and in the mid-1960s they gained recognition for backing Bob Dylan. They released their debut album, Music from Big Pink, in 1968 to critical and popular acclaim, and Roger Waters of Pink Floyd called Music from Big Pink the second most influential record in the history of rock and roll. The band was inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame in 1989. In 2004, Rolling Stone ranked them 50th on its list of the 100 greatest artists of all time, and in 2008, the group received the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Bob Dylan bridged the gap between folk and folk rock and is often regarded as one of the greatest songwriters of all time. Most of his celebrated works date from the 1960s, when songs such as Blowin' in the Wind and The Times They Are A-Changin' became anthems for the civil rights and anti-war movements. Many of his songs adapted the tunes and phraseology of older folk songs, but he drew controversy among the folk community when he adopted electrically amplified rock instrumentation. Bob Dylan has received numerous awards, including 10 Grammy Awards, a Golden Globe Award, and an Academy Award. He has been inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. The Pulitzer Prize Board in 2008 awarded him a special citation for his profound impact on popular music and American culture. In 2016, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature for having created new poetic expressions with great American song tradition. Jackson Browne wrote several songs for Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and the Eagles, including Take It Easy, their first Billboard Top 40 hit. He released his self-titled debut album in 1972, which spawned 2 top 40 hits of his own, Doctor, My Eyes, and Rock Me on the Water. In 1977, the album Running on Empty peaked at number 3 and remained there for over a year. Both a live album and a concept album, it explores themes of life as a touring musician. It was recorded both on stage and in places touring musicians spend time when not playing, such as hotel rooms, backstage, and on a moving tour bus. It produced 2 top 40 singles, Running on Empty and The Loadout Stay. In 2002, Brown received the John Steinbeck Award, given to artists who exemplify the environmental and social values that Steinbeck believed in, and in 2007 he was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Creedence Clearwater Revival was an American rock band that played together since 1959, first as the Blue Velvets and later as the Gollywogs, before settling on the Creedence Clearwater Revival name in 1967. They performed at Woodstock Festival in 1969 and was the first major act signed to appear there, and disbanded acrimoniously in late 1972 after 4 years of chart-topping success. Creedence Clearwater Revival's music is still a staple of classic radio airplay. The compilation album Chronicle, the 20 Greatest Hits, originally released in 1976, is still on the Billboard 200 album chart and reached the 500 weeks mark in December 2020. It has been awarded 10 times platinum. Although their time as one of the most popular groups in the world only lasted for a short period in the mid-1960s, the Byrds are today considered by critics to be among the most influential rock acts of their era. Their signature blend of clear harmony singing and 12-string guitars continued to be influential in rock music. Initially, they pioneered folk rock in 1965 by melding the influence of British invasion bands with contemporary and traditional folk music on the hit singles Mr. Tambourine Man and Turn, 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 and were influential in originating psychedelic rock. The Eagles, Big Star, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, REM, and alternative rock bands of the post-punk era have all exhibited signs of their influence. Crosby, Stills and Nash were a folk rock supergroup made up of American singer-songwriters David Crosby and Stephen Stills and the English singer-songwriter Graham Nash. Crosby had been asked to leave the Byrds in late 1967, and in 1968, Stills' band Buffalo Springfield broke up and Nash left his band The Hollies. Their first album was released in May 1969, from which came 2 top 40 hits, Sweet, Judy Blue Eyes, and Marrakesh Express. Neil Young, the fourth member of Crosby, Stills and Nash, as Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, has received several Grammy Awards, and in 2000, Rolling Stone named him number 34 on their list of the 100 greatest musical artists. Simon and Garfunkel were one of the best-selling music groups of the 1960s, and their biggest hits, including The Sound of Silence, Mrs. Robinson, The Boxer, and Bridge Over Troubled Water, reached number 1 on singles charts worldwide. Under the name Tom and Jerry, they had minor success imitating their idols, the Everly Brothers. In 1965, a version of The Sound of Silence overdubbed with electric guitar and drums became a radio hit, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel had a troubled relationship leading to their breakup in 1970, but have reunited several times, and their 1981 concert in Central Park attracted more than 500,000 people, one of the largest concert attendances in history. Simon and Garfunkel won 10 Grammy Awards, were ranked 40th on Rolling Stone's 2010 list of the greatest artists of all time, and 3rd on its list of the greatest duos. New Wave is somewhat of an umbrella term that encompasses pop-oriented styles from the 1970s and 1980s, such as power pop and ska, that were influenced by the 1960s, lighter strains of music than the generally abrasive rock music that would go on to become punk. The artists associated with New Wave are listed as the Talking Heads, the Pretenders, the Eurythmics, who bridge pop rock with New Wave, the B-52s, the Police, Blondie, and Elvis Costello. Elvis Costello began as part of the pub rock scene in England in the early 1970s and later became part of the punk and new wave movement that emerged in the mid to late 1970s. He has won Grammy Awards in 1999 and 2020, and in 2004, Rolling Stone ranked him number 80 on its list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. The Police formed in London in 1977 and played a style of rock influenced by punk, reggae, and jazz. Following a string of commercial successes from Roxanne, Message in a Bottle, and Don't Stand So Close to Me, the Police were considered one of the leaders in the second British invasion of the US, and Rolling Stone labeled them the first British new wave act to break through in America on a grand scale and possibly the biggest band in the world. They have won 2 Grammy Awards and an MTV Video Music Award. 4 of their 5 studio albums appeared on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and they were included among both Rolling Stone's and VH1's lists of the 100 greatest artists of all time. The Talking Heads formed in 1975 in New York City and helped to pioneer new wave music by integrating elements of punk, funk, and world music, and hit their commercial peak in 1983 with the top 10 hit Burning Down the House. 4 of their albums appear in Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Talking Heads were also number 64 on VH1's list of the 100 greatest artists of all time. In the 2011 update of Rolling Stone's 100 greatest artists of all time, they were ranked number 100. The Pretenders single was a cover of the Kinks song Stop Your Sobbing, released in 1979. In 1980, they reached number 1 with Brass in Pocket, which reached number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100. Their self-titled debut album is regarded as one of the best debut albums of all time and has been named one of the best albums of all time by VH1 at number 52 and Rolling Stone at number 155. The Eurythmics consisted of Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart, who were both previously in The Tourists, which broke up in 1980. They released their first studio album as the Eurythmics, In the Garden, in 1981 and went on to achieve success when their second album, Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, released in 1983, became a worldwide hit, reaching number 2 on the singles chart before hitting number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. They have won an MTV Video Music Award for Best New Artist in 1984, the Grammy Award for Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal in 1987, the Brit Award for Outstanding Contribution to Music in 1999, and in 2020 both Lennox and Stewart were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Devo had a number 14 Billboard chart hit in 1980 with the single Whip It, the song that gave the band mainstream popularity. Their music and visual presentation merged science fiction and dry humor, and they were a pioneer of the music video. Blondie, formed by singer Debbie Harris and guitarist Chris Stein, was a pioneer in the American new wave scene of the mid-1970s, and their first 2 albums contained strong elements of punk. They became known for their eclectic mix of musical styles including disco, pop rock, reggae, and rap. The B-52s evoked a thrift shop aesthetic by drawing from 1950s and 1960s pop sources, early rock and roll, and trash culture. They used call-and-response style vocals, melodic harmonies contrasting with humorous sprechgesang, expressionist vocal techniques between singing and speaking similar to opera. Their guitar and keyboard-driven instrumentation is their trademark sound, which was set apart by their contemporaries by the unusual guitar tunings used on their earlier albums. They had many hits including Rock Lobster, Private Idaho, and Love Shack, and have been nominated for Grammy Awards 3 times for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal and Best Alternative Music Album. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a tip. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that little bell in the corner to get notifications on more videos like this one.